Wow, 2 mid-air hits, 3 mid-air hits.
See ya.
He gets back. You got that cooldown, man.
Wow.
I will never question a decision made by Miro on
That was
Winston.
so sick.
Hey, what's up guys, this is Liam or Weagle on your Overwatch, back with a new video. Today we're going to be covering our favourite monkey slash scientist slash peanut butter enthusiast. We're going to be talking about Winston today because a lot of people are picking him more, especially since his little buff that he got to his bubble, which makes quite a big difference in the right places. But there's a lot of people I'm seeing around in matchmaking, even people that main Winston, making some crazy plays, mistakes, and effectively throwing some games too, and actually getting quite mad and toxic, blaming the healer. So we're going to talk about all of that today. We're going to cover how to initiate, how to drop your bubble, and really carry as Winston, because he's a really great hero, and he's always been massively underrated. And now that people are starting to rate him, it feels like some people don't really know why. So before I get into gameplay examples, I want to talk a little bit about don'ts as Winston. And the one that kills me inside every time I see it, it's like every time someone plays Winston on Hanamura or another 2CP map, is walk to the choke and drop your bubble. Do not do that. It's the worst thing you can do, because your initiation is to jump in and use that bubble to isolate a target or break line of sight with their healers. So if you jump in on a specific target and you drop your bubble, then it's in the way of Ana healing her team. That is a huge play. If you drop your bubble at the choke, you then can't initiate, and if you do, you'll die straight away because you don't have that bubble when you initially jump in. So do not drop your bubble at the choke. See it all the time. The only time that is really okay is if you're playing on defense, or maybe if when you're attacking someone gets pulled to the choke and you want to save them with a bubble. The same as everything, there's always these niche situations where you can do the unorthodox thing, but in general, Winston needs to be initiating with his bubble. Now, when you do drop your bubble, make sure you've not been bubbled by Zarya. So I think a lot of people now in matchmaking know that if you have the Zarya-Winston combo, that the Zarya should bubble the Winston. Well, if she is doing that actively, when you land, don't drop your bubble straight away, because not only will Zarya not get her charge, but you're also extending the team fight longer if you time it well. So when you land, make sure the bubble from Zarya is gone before you drop your own. You can then break again the line of sight with your bubble in order to mess up the enemy team. Now the next one is, don't jump in too far and don't initiate too early. Now, I see this with Winstons all the time that get really mad at their team for not supporting them, but a lot of the time, actually, it's bad Winston play. If you just dive in, remember that he can dive halfway across the map in a second. He has the quickest from here to there speed, I think, in the game, apart from if you was to count Sombra teleporting or maybe Tracer using all 3 blinks. But to actually jump up to a location or get in someone's face, it's just about the best in the game what Winston can do. And if you don't have a Lucio or a team that's instantly going to follow up on, then you have to realize that that's not the kind of game you're playing. And that doesn't mean Winston can't be used when not in a dive comp, because he can be used on defense, which we'll get into later. But it's all about your timing on these jumps and initiation. Let your team know when you're going to jump, but it's also your job to make sure your team are there ready with you when you initiate. If you're not playing the dive comp initiating engagement, then you'll need another main tank, and you can still run Winston, but you have to pick off them targets and dive them at the right times. If you just jump into the enemy team all the time, your team aren't with you, that's as bad of a play on your end as it is on theirs. Sometimes you can't play Winston if that's the game you're going for, but honestly, if there's either a soldier giving you trouble or that Ana simply healing too much, you can play Winston to dive in at the right times. Just don't jump into their whole team when you've just dropped your bubble at the choke on Hanamura, because you're just going to get wrecked. It's all about the timings, and we'll go into that a little bit more later. The last thing to make sure you don't do is overstay your welcome. When you dive in as Winston, you're trying to split them off, maybe get an easy kill or finish up on some damage, but make sure that you get out of there and don't overstay your welcome. You're better off staying alive to jump out, get healed quickly, and then jump back in with your bubble again than you are trying to overextend to maybe get a kill. Make sure you're always moving around, jumping in, jumping out, jumping up and down. Just stay alive. You can't be dying as Winston very often. If you are, then you have to swap hero because you need to be alive a lot of the time. He doesn't do tons of damage and you need to be a constant threat on the enemy's team. Now, the do's for Winston, things that you make sure you need to do, and I don't think people realize this as well, is when you use your jetpack as Winston, you need to be landing on enemies to do extra damage. Now, this is something I don't think people realize, that when you land on someone, it does 50 damage. So if you land in the middle of the enemy team, whether they've been gravitoned or whether they're just balled up or there's a couple of healers together, when you physically land on them, you will instantly do 50 damage. You can also melee as well when you do that, so you've pretty much done half of a lot of the squish's health in the game by landing on them and meleeing them. You can then zap them to your heart's content, but the thing is, not a lot of people seem to realize the power of this. So every time you're jumping in, you want to be landing on someone. If you're not getting the value. One thing that you can also do that people don't seem to realize is if you hold backwards when you jump, you'll only do a mini jump. So when you're in the middle of a fight and someone goes off to the side a little bit, you can do a tiny little jump to reinitiate and land on them and do extra damage again. This also goes for his ultimate. So getting someone in a corner and left clicking them is great, but if you're also jumping into them with your ultimate, you're doing extra damage every single time you jump. Another quick thing is to just make sure you melee to finish off a target, because it's just instantly 30 damage. This goes for a lot of heroes in the game. It goes for Tracer as well. In particular, Winston, Tracer and Genji are heroes that if you ever need to finish someone off, just make sure you melee, because it's really, really good for them heroes that are in there to do that chip damage. Say you're running out of ammo, whatever it may be, melee is something always cool. Now, the last do is something that I did mention already. Make sure you just use your bubble to split things off. It's not just to drop and keep yourself alive. If you jump in between the enemy team and you drop your bubble, you split that line of sight from the healers and the tanks, your team are going to have a much easier time trying to win the team fight. Before we get into how to do all of this cool stuff, the counters I want to talk about first is a lot of people take Winston to just counter a Widow or a Genji, which is fine and he can do that, but make sure when you ask your Winston to do that, or you are the Winston, and your team are backing you up, because if you just dive in and the whole enemy team turn around, there's no point in diving their Widow because you're going to die and you're not getting any value. Also, trying to take Winston against a Tracer, not a very good counter. A big misconception. If there's a Tracer giving you trouble, you want a Roadhog or a McCree more than anything. I'd even take Soldier to counter Tracer over Winston, because a good Tracer will just feed off of a Winston, get her ult, and you really can't kill her as him if she's any good, because she will just be out of your way every time you think you're going to zap her. Now, we'll talk about the 2 ways to actually initiate and do stuff as Winston. We'll talk about defense as well after, but the main reason people pick Winston, the thing that everybody knows him for mostly, is to be the spearhead of a dive comp. So you dive in, your Zarya bubbles you, easy peasy, right? That's the dream scenario when your team are all following up. It doesn't happen very often in solo queue, but that's what we know him for. So when you're doing this, all of the do's and don'ts that I've spoke about apply. Now, I can show you this done badly from me. This is me playing Winston, and I'm playing on Ilios, and we come up to this first point, and I don't get a great dive in, I don't see a good opening, and instantly they're in our backline. So they're just destroying my team. My friend Larry dies on Anna, and this is just poor initiation. This is like what you don't want to do as Winston, what you don't want your team to be doing in this case. And then when we retake, it's a much different story. I dive in, pick out a target, everyone follows up, and that really is that coin flip of a difference when you're playing Winston. Do you keep dedicating to this dive? Are people going to follow up with you or not? What you want to be doing in the perfect world is finding their soldier. Maybe the person that's doing the most damage, or maybe that Anna's having a great game and she's keeping everything alive. You want to try and dive in, but not just into the death ball. You need to try and wait for an opening. When that opening presents itself, you dive whatever that hero is, because the context changes in every game. And then you get your bubble down to split them off. So 1, they can't heal their team if they're a healer, or 2, it's a lot harder for the enemy team to follow up and save them when you've dove in. This is like stellar Winston play. So what you want to do is dive in, split something off, isolate a target. Meanwhile, your team should be clearing up, and that's how we want it to be. But there's another kind of Winston play as well, and these two go hand in hand. They can work in the same rounds even. It really depends what's going on. But the other Winston play is the pounce style. So what you want to do is you actually physically wait for an opening. You're not necessarily the initiation in this case, because if your stuff's not being followed up on, or you have a Reinhardt, maybe he's your main point of initiation, whatever the reason may be, you might be playing the get a pick style Winston, which is also great in its own way. If there's a soldier that keeps taking the high ground that's giving your team trouble, this is so good. You wait for that opportunity, you wait till there's a team fight, and then you pounce in. And again, you have to make sure you land these jumps on people, and then you drop your bubble if you need to, but you only wait to drop your bubble if you need it, especially in a 1v1, because Winston's going to 1v1 a lot of the heroes in the game anyway, and if you need it, you can drop the bubble and use that as cover. You can go in and out of it in order to protect yourself. These are the two different styles, and applying them is up to you entirely. It depends what comp you're running, it depends on what the enemy team are running. I mean, you don't take Winston if they've got Roadhog and Reaper. If you're playing into that, your dive comp needs to be perfect. But the thing is, you can play Winston into Roadhog and Reaper, but you have to wait until them two heroes let you dive in, pick off the Ana or another character, and get out. And it's all about game sense with Winston. It's all about the timings on when to do things. You can't simply just dive in, no brain, no aim, I'm a Winston main. Actually, he's all brain and one of the hardest heroes to play in the entire game in terms of game sense. He's nowhere near as easy as a lot of other heroes, and I think people go on him expecting to just counter a Tracer, or expecting to just use him because they don't want to play Ryan and think, well, Winston's a tank. Well, the thing is, if you play Winston like Reinhardt, you're going to be in trouble, because when you drop your bubble at the choke that's only got a pretty minimal amount of HP on it, well, they've got a massive great big blue shield, and there's Symmetra spam coming through it, and your bubble's gone, and then you have no means to initiate. Meanwhile, your team then poke at the choke, one of our favourite sayings, and you're not getting anywhere. They're just getting free ult charge off of your big meaty scientist face. So you have to know when to dive in and when not to. And that's the two different playstyles. Are you the initiation, or are you the pesky cleanup Winston? Both are perfectly acceptable, but applying them contexts is what really matters. And I can show you another game on Ilios right now where I kind of am the main tank. However, we're not really playing great as a dive, so I actually, as I say, I use both contexts in one go. I'm kind of trying to save people by diving and tanking when I have to, but a lot of the time I'm just kind of trying to pick things off, and you'll see that I'm trying to be pesky and doing some damage in the back line. I get like a triple kill, and then I ult the Winston, which is great. So what I'll do is I'll show you some more initiations and stuff, and you can learn how that goes in the background while I talk a little bit about Winston's ultimate quick, because again, a little bit of a misunderstood ultimate, because if you use it as the last man alive to try and stall out a point, like, that's okay, but that's where a lot of people use it. However, what it's best at is crowd controlling another ultimate, particularly McCree and Soldier, because if either of them pop their ult and you're just Winston in their face knocking them around, they're not going to get any value, which is exactly what you want. So trying to save Winston's ultimate for that scenario is way better than just popping it to try and stall out a fight. It can be good for that, but again, context really matters. I mean, do you already have 99 points? Are you even going to get anywhere by stalling out in this situation? If it's last point and you're defending on Hanamura, then yeah, you'll do it. But if you've already got 80 points and you're attacking on King of the Hill when the enemy team are about to retake, you probably want to save your ult for the next team fight. So trying to figure that out in the game, of course, takes practice and things like that. The other thing people use the ultimate for is, of course, knocking people off the map, which is always great. Now, one very, very awesome way to use it, actually, is to finish up on a kill that could be really important to the team fight. Now, one of the most famous examples is actually of Miro, when he pops his Winston ult to jump out of the map to kill the Mercy to jump back in. I've also seen my friend FREEDO do this as well, where someone flies away and they're really low and his jump is on cooldown. So what he does is he'll pop his ultimate to jump up and get that kill. That can be team fight winning. And then again, in that scenario, that's what you use his ult for. It's used in loads of different ways, and it's so good. It's such a good ultimate and massively underrated, but the thing that's difficult about it, the same with the rest of his kit, is really when to implement it, and that's the thing that a lot of people struggle with. And honestly, a lot of it you'll learn from watching pros, of course from watching guides, and playing as well. I think once you realize the do's and don'ts, so don't drop your bubble at the choke, do initiate, but don't initiate if you're not running a dive comp, then you go for the pick style. Once you know the basics, I think the other stuff will come more naturally, like how to land a jump, for example. I can't really teach you that because it's all mechanical, you play and learn game sense, right? And reactions as well. So you want to dive in and land on things. That is all practice. But I can tell you the jump does act differently. Like, as I said earlier, if you're holding back when you do the boost, then you won't go as far. If you jump with the space bar or whatever it may be on console and then do the jetpack, you jump higher, things like that. But apart from that, then of course it's all mechanical skill and practice. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is Winston on defense, because he's very, very good and once more underrated on defense too. There's a few reasons he can be good. The first one we'll talk about is in a normal defensive setup. So you would probably also have a Reinhardt in this scenario, and you're using Winston to dive the Widow on Gibraltar, because there's always a Widow on Gibraltar. Winston's also fairly good against Farah and Mercy. Like if they get hit by the Soldier or the McCree, he's good at jumping up, doing a bit of damage, and again, meleeing them at the end of that damage just to make sure you do another 30. He's good at that, and that is the pick style that I'm talking about, but it's on defense. So you have to be very calm and collective. You have to wait for that opportunity. So your Reinhardt's there with his barrier, your team are poking, they're doing some damage, and you wait for a target to isolate when you're on defense. So you'll see something, you'll dive in, and you'll kill it, and that's exactly what you want. I can show you some really great Gibraltar gameplay now where there's a few examples where I wait for the right time, I dive in, I land on them, I do damage, I drop the bubble, I break the line of sight, and my team can follow up on it. That is a really good way to play Winston on defense with the Rhine setup, but you can also play it with a Diva setup. So you can play Winston Diva. Now, why would you do this? Why would you not have a Rhine on defense? Because I know Rhine's really good, but if the enemy team are running Farah, Genji, Tracer, Winston, and they're in your face, Reinhardt has a very, very limited applicability. So actually the best thing to do is run a kind of a similar comp and actually play like a split counter dive comp. Very hard to do, but it's not harder in solo queue than it is to try and run a Rhine into this. That's the thing. A lot of people think we need the Rhine, we need the security blanket, but the thing is, in solo queue, if your Rhine just stood there, you're going to die constantly. Whereas if you don't have that shield there, your whole team will know that there's nothing to stand behind, and they'll kind of naturally split up, and then you have to pick out the target. So again, you and the Diva will take turns to initiate or initiate together in order to pick out things that are off on the high ground or flanking, because that's what Rhine is really susceptible to, is that Farah, Genji, Tracer, Diva, speed boost, Fest, that is very popular now, and for good reason, because it's very good. But the easiest ways to counter it are not standing there with Rhine while your team are off to the side. It's just not going to work. This is where, again, Winston's very good. So you wait for your opportunity, you find something, and you pounce it. Or if there isn't an opportunity, you initiate with your Diva on the enemy team when they all ball up or get close, or whenever there's a threat. I'm not saying it's super easy, but it's way more applicable than people think it is. But once again, the do's and don'ts. Don't just drop your bubble as the defensive shield for your team. Again, that doesn't work. You all hide, and then you jump in and you initiate. You drop that bubble, and your team fight. Simply putting your bubble down anywhere just as a shield is just the worst thing you can do as Winston. It always has to be in order to split something off, to deny healing, or to just keep yourself alive, but not at the choke. If you're not initiating as Winston, then yes, pick Reinhardt, because he is simply better at that job. Right guys, this was a long one. Lots of Winston stuff, a lot of ways people play him wrong, but I think them simple do's and don'ts will really help you guys out in the core mechanic, fundamentals, and I think then you'll be able to learn this hero, and we'll see a lot more Winstons around, hopefully, that are really knowing what it means to be a scientist main. Let me know what you guys think. Did this help out? Let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Be sure to check out our Twitter where we tweet loads of stuff. We like to interact with some of you guys on there, so make sure you do that. Be sure to join the notification squad so you guys get informed when our videos go live. And as always, don't forget our Discord where you guys can find the Winston main of your dreams. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and have a great day as always. Take care and peace, people.